I know I cut my knuckle that day.
On what day?
On Christmas Eve.
Doing what?
Reaching in the toolbox of my truck and then into the pocket on the door. I cut open my knuckle and there's a blood stain on the door.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Did you know about that injury to Scott's hand? And not only does he say it himself in his own words, but he says when he got that injury, he says he got it on the day that Lacey died. He also claims that he sustained the injury while digging into a toolbox. I think that is partially true. I believe that he cut his hands while working on chicken wire. And we need to talk about what he was using that chicken wire for as well. In this analysis, I want to talk about what case inspired Scott. What case do you think may have inspired Scott Peterson in terms of criminal psychology, but also criminal intertextuality? Here's a hint. Think about the date when this crime occurred, Christmas Eve 2002. Did you answer JonBenet Ramsey? If you did,
well, you're not wrong.
But that's only part of the answer. Now, when it comes to fathoming criminal intertextuality, specifically where one criminal looks to another case for inspiration, for guidance, what is the crucial ingredient that's going to resonate with him? And I mean, besides the obvious one, context.
Time. The answer is time.
Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Now, in terms of this series, we're going to continue looking at insights from the Netflix docuseries. So if you haven't watched the Netflix docuseries, please do watch it, and we will continue to analyze what comes out of it. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. Bear in mind, I don't do live streams, so if you want to show your appreciation, please do consider hitting the thanks button. And let's get started. So, number one, how to get away with murder. Remember, we're looking at intertextualities here. What case stands head and shoulders above all others in America as an example of justice denied? Well, arguably JonBenet Ramsey. Now consider what a would-be killer learns from the Ramsey case. In 2002, the year that Lacey was murdered, it was 5, almost 6 years after the fact, and the Ramsey case was still unsolved. Why? And so someone looking at this case from a cynical, perhaps opportunistic perspective may have gone, okay, how do you get away with murder? Let's look at Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. How did they pull it off?
There's got to be a way of how do we do it?
Now, if Scott was looking at the Ramsey case and was trying to figure out, what was the secret formula? Well, one could be Christmas equals no cops. Is the fact that the Ramsey case occurred slap bang over Christmas a factor, an important factor in why it was policed so badly, why the investigation was compromised, why there was only one cop in the house for most of the morning? Number 3, Christmas equals no reporters. Now, if Scott was determined not just to get away with it, but to keep things on the down low, Christmas Eve was arguably an even better time to commit a crime than just after Christmas, where you've got 1-2 days of that whole Yuletide thing already having passed, where everyone is absorbed in their families and kind of introspective and turning inward, right? And taking off work as well. Now, it does make sense, given that he was having a secret affair with Amber Frey, that Scott didn't want his name or face in the papers, and further, didn't want any of this case in the papers. And we actually opened the first video with an audio clip where the reporter was saying, well, conspicuous in his absence, everyone was looking for Lacey except Scott. Why? Well, because he was trying to keep a low profile. Why? Because he's trying to protect the relationship that he wanted, the one with Amber Frey. He didn't want Amber to know the truth about what was going on. And Scott would raise eyebrows and then red flags because he was so media shy. In some footage of him taking calls, you can see him wearing a cap, and he seems to be trying to cover his face with the visor of the hat. Ditto when he did his unofficial perp walk in front of the media when he left his home. He's wearing a cap. He doesn't really want to be seen. Now, if Scott did look at the timing, he may have figured Christmas Eve as an even better time when no one would be around, when reporters would be with their families as much as cops would be. And then, that not only that night, the next day and the day after. On paper, all of this reasoning seems to make sense, but what he didn't figure on was two things. Number one, the massive community support that Lacey got, not only from friends and neighbors, but from Americans in general. Number two, after OJ and JonBenet, true crime was waiting to make another major touchdown in the American media, and small-town Modesto became arguably the third highest profile case after OJ and JonBenet. Also, in terms of this whole thing about reporters having gone home, the media cycle does slow over certain holidays, sometimes also over weekends. And it's sometimes in this vacuum that a case can explode more loudly and clearly than within the sort of noisy landscape of the media. So the reasoning that reporters would be not working doesn't really make sense. Sometimes you'll have a journalist alone in the newsroom, they'll find a story, and then this story will really explode. And I think that's what happened here. Now, additional lessons from the Ramsey case that may have inspired Scott, well, get the human remains as far outside the home as possible. That's also what Chris Watts tried to do. And instead of a ransom note inside the house to suggest what had happened, Scott used the family dog, didn't he? Didn't he use Mackenzie as a kind of abbreviated message, a kind of symbolic message, a kind of ransom note to suggest Lacey was outside? And I'm not sure that she was. Where do you think Lacey was murdered? Outside? Now, the whole JonBenet Ramsey intertextuality makes sense, doesn't it? Well, not quite.
Ladies and gentlemen, my esteemed colleague, Mr. Marino, has just brought some new evidence to my attention.
So I don't think this was just a case of Christmas sort of drawing near and then some JonBenet anniversary special came on and the idea popped into Scott's mind, sometime like in mid or late December. And then Scott took out his notepad. I mean, at the end of as the end of the year drew nearer, the premeditation was likely being fine-tuned and improved, sure. And I'm sure if the Ramsey case came onto his radar, it may have played into his criminal psychology, certainly. But I don't think the Ramsey case was what inspired Scott to begin with. No.
Miss Vickers, is there an agenda that you're not telling us about?
Yes, I'm going to share the tragic tale of someone a lot closer to home than Boulder, Colorado, and sharing the very same crime scene, San Francisco Bay, as Lacey. Put up your hand or tick a box every time something rings a bell in the Hernandez case. Just 7 months before the very pregnant Lacey Peterson went missing from her home in Modesto in December 2002, the very pregnant Evelyn Hernandez disappeared from San Francisco. So this suggests Scott's premeditation may have been awakened as long as 6 months prior to Lacey's murder. Now, according to the article, Hernandez was 24 when she disappeared. According to family and friends, she was excited, like Lacey, to have another baby, a son that she planned to name Fernando. Aguilera allegedly wasn't wild about the idea. Aguilera's the father. Well, neither was Scott. In fact, he told his mistress, Amber Frey, that he wanted to have a vasectomy. Now, according to the article, several reports state that Hernandez didn't know Aguilera was married until she called his mom to inquire why her boyfriend wasn't enthused about the pregnancy. So it was so obvious that she saw it, felt it, knew it. Meanwhile, Aguilera's wife allegedly knew about Hernandez, but was unaware that she was pregnant. Now, when this story made local headlines, you can bet they resonated with Scott, because contextually, he was in exactly the same situation, except it wasn't his girlfriend who was pregnant, In Scott's case, it was his wife. But what was also different was Scott wanted to keep his girlfriend, whereas Aguilera allegedly wanted to keep his wife. Now, according to the San Francisco Police Department, Hernandez last spoke to family members and was seen with Alexis at his school, Buena Vista Elementary in San Francisco's Mission District. That was May 1st, 2002. On May 7th, Hernandez's due date, Aguilera reported her and her son missing to the authorities. Like Lacey, Hernandez disappeared very close to when the unborn baby would have been full term. Now, who would this alarm the most? The term becoming due, right? According to the article, several days after Hernandez's disappearance, a wallet containing cash and a disability check made out to Evelyn Hernandez was found in South San Francisco, just a few blocks from the limousine company that employed Aguilera. In July, a decomposed body, just a pair of legs and a torso, clad in maternity clothes, washed up beneath a bay bridge along San Francisco's Embarcadero. Ring a bell? That is very similar to Lacey. DNA tests confirmed the remains to be those of Hernandez. Her son Alexis is still missing. Now, this part is certainly compelling. Her head, hands, and feet were missing, as was her nearly full-term baby. Due to the amount of decomposition, the medical examiner couldn't determine if someone removed the baby via C-section, whether it was a natural birth that had occurred or that the baby had been expelled, kind of in a natural way. The cause of death was also unable to be determined. And thus, tragically, Evelyn Hernandez's murderer got away with it. That case is still unsolved to this day. Now, if Scott Peterson was keeping tabs of this in the newspaper, perhaps he figured all he needed to do was do a better job than Aguilera did in weighing down the body. And we know a lot of effort went into everything, buying the boat, making several concrete anchors in his warehouse, etc. Now, according to the article, several reports state that Aguilera's wife provided his alibi. Presumably, this means that she claimed Aguilera was with her the day Hernandez and her son were thought to have gone missing. Facts surrounding this alibi aren't clear. That's according to the article. Probably Scott thought a little gaslighting here and there would be enough to dispel the occasional annoying inquiry. Yes, he likely imagined Lacey's disappearance would warrant a little article here and another article there, but over Christmas, perhaps none at all. Now, by its own admission, Hernandez's hometown paper, the San Francisco Chronicle, published 32 stories about Peterson in the months between her disappearance and the arrest of Scott Peterson, including 4 front-page reports. The paper published only 4 stories on Hernandez, not a single one on the front page.
Welcome to the real world.
When Evelyn and Alexis Hernandez disappeared, the authorities initially thought that Evelyn might have simply split town with her son. Her boyfriend was a married man who didn't want to help with the baby, and her mother was back in El Salvador. But would Hernandez really have boarded a plane 6 days before one's due date? Well, police didn't suspect foul play until Hernandez's wallet was found. These cases are so chillingly intertextual that some have speculated that the same perpetrator was responsible for both crimes. I doubt that, although I would say the same type of perpetrator, yes. The one who gets someone pregnant and doesn't want to pay the piper. The one who wants his cake and to eat it too. So if there was criminal intertextuality, I think the Hernandez case played a far greater role, and possibly the Ramsey case simply reinforced the idea that it was possible to commit murder and get away with it. The most important part was getting rid of the human remains, and the Hernandez case certainly provided one scenario for that. Arguably, in this area, Scott did come close to achieving his goal, well, at least for 3 long months. Once Lacey and Connor were found, and I do think one has to wonder why Connor was found in the one case, but not Hernandez's baby. That's a very interesting contrast and maybe one worth discussing. But once that happened, once Lacey and Connor were found, Scott's goose was cooked. Okay, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening. Look out for the next analysis on Amanda Knox coming this weekend, likely on Sunday. So look out for that.